Mini PC gaming is, frankly, kind of a weird niche to be in. I imagine 2, maybe 3 scenarios in which someone might become interested in making these tiny sub-ITX PCs play games. Either you've been assigned one at your place of work and want to do some gaming on your lunch break, or you're on an extreme budget and picked up an ex-business machine because it was the only option within your price range. There is, however, a third possibility, a fascination, nay, an addiction to small PCs. And whenever there's a passionate fan base, however illogical the niche may be, it seems there's always going to be a big company looking to cater to them. The first difference between Asrock's Deskmini X300 and a business mini PC is intent. Asrock is a brand more known for catering to PC enthusiasts who might value such features as a standardised heatsink, BIOS with access to clock speed overrides and even an HDMI on the back, but maybe don't need a VGA port quite so much. Working inside the Deskmini then is functionally a lot more like building a PC than cracking open a laptop. This is all the more appropriate as Deskminis are provided as barebones kits, requiring the owner to provide their own SODIMM memory, storage and CPU, in this case a socket AM4 APU from AMD. Despite the X in the model name, there isn't much of a gamer aesthetic to the Deskmini X300. Compared to, say, Intel's gaming NUCs, this is a fairly conservative black box design, with 4 tiny Phillips head screws on the back, allowing the entire back panel and motherboard tray to come out as a single unit. Although regional contents may differ, the version I received came supplied without a Wi-Fi adapter, but did come with a rather Spartan-looking heatsink. Apparently there's room for a low-profile cooler from Noctua or CryoRig, and I could remove the shroud from one of the myriad AMD Wraith Stealths I seem to have acquired, but I'm going to work with a pack-in cooler for this video to see what it can do. Finally, a point of contention with the Lenovo I reviewed previously, Asrock provide a 120 watt power brick, which should be sufficient to power even the hungrier APUs AMD have to offer. Speaking of, I have 2 Ryzen APUs to hand which I want to try out. The Ryzen 5 Pro 3400GE, borrowed from my Lenovo M75Q, and the Ryzen 3 4350G. If you watched the M75Q video, you might remember that I tried a 1.35 volt 16 gig kit of DDR4 3200 on that PC, but that it would only run at 2666. I'll be comparing both processors in the same games as I did in that previous video, this time using full 3200 speed RAM from Kingston. For storage, although the Deskmini has a free M.2 slot for NVMe or SATA SSDs, I'll be using one of the very fragile looking SATA adapters to connect a 2.5 inch 1TB ADATA drive that I had lying around. Now, let's get started with the bed. My initial theory about the best use case for the 4350G was CPU-intensive, graphically simple games like CSGO and Valorant certainly bears that out. My initial test on the M75Q returned an average FPS of 93. Here in the Deskmini, the 3400GE doesn't see much improvement, but the 4350G comes in over 100 FPS. Warzone gains about 10 to 15% switching from the 3400GE to the 4350G, returning averages of 46 and 1% lows of almost 20. Honestly, given that the 3400GE actually did better in the Lenovo, I think the Deskmini's lower score with that CPU could be down simply to variances from run to run. Fortnite in performance mode sees a pretty big difference in averages in favour of the 3400GE. The 1% lows do tell a different story, though this would appear to be just the luck of the draw when playing Fortnite. Running in DX12 with competitive settings sees the 4350G take the lead, getting close to the magic 60 on average, dropping from 1080 to say 1600 by 900, or using the resolution scaler could help push that frame rate over the line. Valheim is a close race, and neither result is exactly better than the other, just less bad. The 4350G wins on averages, just shy of 29 FPS versus 26 FPS on the 3400 GE, but loses on 1% lows, 12.4 versus 13.8. Like I said, less bad, still bad though. Switching to the newer processor in Cyberpunk gives us virtually the same averages and a virtually imperceptible increase in 1% lows. Honestly, it's just kind of amazing that the game runs at all at this point. Genshin Impact runs very well on both APUs with almost identical averages, but the 4350G takes the lead in 1% lows. Again, the Lenovo did better than the Deskmini here, with the latter suffering some major frame time spikes that didn't help the 1% lows. Apex Legends was a great experience on both APUs, certainly a lot better than I expected. The only thing letting the 4350G down is the 1% lows, though as far as I can tell this tends to occur mostly in areas with foliage effects, and depending on where on the map you are, you may find either APU suffers these kinds of performance drops. I know some people probably look at the games I select and think, who cares? Just show me how it runs GTA 5. Well, I see you aging budget gamers, and I understand. The 3400 GE holds the slimmest of leads over the 4350G in this mid-2010s classic. Rocket League was a pretty big win for the 4350G all in all. Both CPUs make for a good experience, but the Zen 2 APU has a definite, noticeable lead, averaging 80 FPS as opposed to the 3400 GE's 55. So I was surprised that there was no real overall performance benefit from the X300 over the business PC. Once the Lenovo has had its PSU upgraded, the slower RAM seems to make little or no difference in practice. The Deskmini's default power supply is already a 120 watt, so I can't imagine that there will be a whole lot of benefit in upgrading it further, though that might be worth investigating in the future. The competition between processors also didn't go exactly how I expected. I had a feeling the 4350G would win in a couple of CPU-bound titles, but I expected the higher core count of the 3400 GE to count for more in other games. But it seems the increased clock speeds really did make up for that shortcoming. While I certainly wouldn't recommend upgrading from the 3400 GE to the newer model, if you're starting from scratch and the prices are similar, I think the 4350G earns a slim victory overall. And that was going to be my conclusion, but I wasn't completely satisfied. I'm not normally an advocate of including overclocking in videos, unless overclocking is the purpose of the video, but as this is pretty much the only thing remaining that the X300 has going for it over the Prebuilt, I thought it made sense to at least test the 4350G's overclocking abilities to see if there wasn't some way of making it more appealing. Knowing that the CPU was already significantly stronger than the GPU, I decided not to waste any time overclocking it and just made do with the 600 MHz boost to the RAM and 500 MHz on the GPU. This overclock had a total uplift of about 5% on CPU scores in TimeSpy and just shy of 20% on GPU and overall scores. In games, however, this margin varied pretty wildly. The biggest boost came for Cyberpunk, which gained over 35% total performance, lifting it up to 32 FPS from 24. GTA 5 gained 28%, pushing averages over 50. Fortnite seemed to gain about 20% in performance mode, with 1% lows remaining much more stable than without the overclock. DX12 doesn't benefit quite as much, but likewise sees a big boost in 1% lows. Valheim, Genshin Impact and Rocket League all gain about 18 to 20% overall. Warzone only sees a 12 to 14% improvement, which could as easily be down to run-to-run variances. Apex Legends gains virtually nothing on average, but seems to have much more stable frame pacing overall. And finally, Valorant, a game that this CPU could push up to 180 FPS with even a modest graphics card like a R9 270X, gains about 14%, hovering just under an average of 120 FPS. Wrapping this up, then, isn't as easy as I thought it might be. The X300 has some definite appeal over the tiny Lenovo, especially if you like to tinker. The installation process was surprisingly easy, probably one of the easiest I've ever had. The stock cooler isn't the most pleasant sounding, but it's more than adequate to the task of cooling an APU, and installation is shockingly simple. Moving to a bigger heatsink would obviously have benefits for noise, but frankly, given how cool even the overclocked processor runs, I don't see a need for better cooling other than that. I guess the X300 makes more sense to someone enthusiastic about making APUs work for a living, and I'm sorry to bring size into it, given its performance, the Deskmini just isn't quite mini enough for me. My quest for the perfect mini PC continues. But I'm not done with these two just yet. I'm going to go full ETA Prime in the near future, putting these mini PCs through their paces in the ultimate battleground: emulation. Thanks for watching, kindly do the usual YouTube things if you feel so inclined, and I'll see you next time.